I'm talking right now with Caleb from Sinai Vessel. Their new album, Brokenlegged, is coming out this January on Tiny Engines, and I'm really excited for that. So I guess we'll start off just by talking about this album artwork. It's like a pretty haunting image. Where did that come from?
It's a Canadian photographer named Nathan, I think Cypress is how you pronounce his name. Our bassist, Danny, follows just a number of artists on Tumblr and Instagram and other things like that, and followed this guy for a while and noticed that he had an image set of images like the one on the cover that he really enjoyed and sort of bookmarked for a long time, but we were looking for just image-based artwork that resonated with the content of the record, and we found that and immediately knew what was up. So the image is kind of interesting. It's a selfie, actually. That's the photographer in the image.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would not have guessed that one. That makes it even more intriguing now, I think.
Yeah. It's like the dude just got naked and threw dirt on himself and set a self-timer. So it's weird.
And you're just like, this is what epitomizes this. So what would you say, sort of the theme, the feeling of this album is going to be? I started listening to you back on the Profanity EP, which now is a bunch of years ago, but
yeah,
you've been working on this one for a while. So what is sort of what was sort of the theme on this one?
The theme on this one, it helps if you look at the theme of this record in respect to what we did on Profanity. I think the concept of Brokenlegged alone can stand on its own, but since you mentioned the EP, Profanity was sort of me growing disillusioned with a lot of things I'd been raised in, particularly evangelistic Christian sort of church culture. I don't know, just a white middle class privilege upbringing, and just deconstructing a lot of those things, but also just sort of growing up and getting ready to leave home. I wrote that record as I was sort of settling into college my freshman year, but Brokenlegged is sort of the epilogue to that. It's sort of about trying to figure out how to live among people who haven't come to the same realizations of truth as you. So it's like you say everybody believes in this thing, and you've discovered a thing to be a farce or a lie or not the entire truth. And you have to live with that idea that, a lot of what people believe is false and is sort of paper thin and two-dimensional, but you have to live among people who just take the status quo as being the truth, I guess. And that comes into a lot of different areas of play. It comes into contact with religious and theological belief, political action or inaction, but also comes down to just the worldview that people have about things like death. There are a lot of songs on the record about death, and how death isn't something that we consider in our day-to-day goings-on of life. But I don't know. Yeah, it's about just living with a new awareness and how that sort of can alienate you from having contact with people who don't have the same awareness, I guess. So.
Yeah, and that is a pretty fitting theme for right now. 2017 is looking like it's going to be a very troubling time, I guess we'll say.
And this record to us is old now, so it coming out in a climate that is fitting is a great serendipitous thing that we didn't know that would happen, of course. It's kind of a shame that it is really appropriate, but
yeah, I actually heard that about Jeff Rosenstock's album Worry as well. It's it was written years ago as well, and sort of just that's what happens when you're onto something, though. When you're onto the feeling that you feel it, and a lot of other people feel it, and sometimes that's actually the situation that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Truth is truth. Like it's not contingent upon time necessarily.
So there's already 2 songs that have been streaming from this record. But one question I like to ask people before their records come out is, what is a track that like you were really invested in, that like you really felt happy with how it came out?
Ooh. So the record's been done for a long time, or at least nominally done for a long time. So my favorites have shifted a lot, and probably will only continue to shift. And right now, because I have like half the next record written, my favorites are sort of like the bridges of like what will connect to the next record. So I think if anyone likes the songs "Dogs" and "Birth Blood," which are right after one another, that is more towards what we're headed on the next record. So I like those, and I like how compact, especially I like how compact "Dogs" is. It's a song that can be played by one person or by the full band, and I think it retains its strength. So I think we did a good job of that. The first half of the record, probably the first 3 tracks, especially the second and third, Ramekin and Laughlin, dig into a tone that we haven't ever done before, which is sort of like more spacious and pensive and ambient. A lot of our music pre this album is like really direct, like very straightforward, sort of like poppy indie rock stuff. And we wanted to just, I don't know, be a little bit more atmospheric and supple. So I think we did a good job of accomplishing that goal, and I like those tracks for that goal. It's not something that I think we'll necessarily keep doing as a band, but to have it broaden that like palette of what our tone is nice to have done. So I like the first half of the record for that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always good when you can sort of push the boundaries a little bit. You have like another tool in your toolbox. You're like, all right, we can do this. Like, we can put that into a different song in a different way.
Yeah.
But it is good to hear that you're working on the next one already, because it was the space in between there. So I was like, man, it's kind of become like a joke among the alternative staff. Like, yo, when are we gonna hear that Sinai Vessel album? It's almost like brand new. Like, oh, is it gonna come out this year? Is it really though? Is it really good?
Yeah. It's like the, I don't know, the punk or DIY Frank Ocean sort of thing. It's like we kept forestalling it, but it feels good. Like, we're really happy with the record we came out with, the record that is coming out, and I am confident in every decision that we made, although some of them were really weird.
Hey, sometimes you just gotta go for it, though. It sounds, from the song so far, I'm definitely very excited for it. That's like one of my bigger releases coming up next year. I guess we can also talk about some, like, maybe your personal tastes, and what are some bands that you listen to, not necessarily that inspire you in this album, but just in general that you've been listening
to? As far as most recent listening goes, I discovered a band like 2 weeks ago called Fraternal Twin. I think they're from the New York area. I had heard them compared to my friends and Tiny Engines label mates in this band called Pear a lot. Who are really, really, really wonderful, and people had sort of been lining those two up as being comparable. And I think there's a lot of differences in tone, and I don't think they're by any means like necessarily incredibly similar bands, but because it was a sort of recommended, if you like Pear, you'll like this band, I checked them out, and I love their record. It's called Homeworlding, and it's really, really wonderful. Sort of like, it feels like maybe the subtlety of a band like the XX or something like that, but mixed with more guitar-led sort of angular indie music. But it's really, really nice and very simple, and it comes from that sort of New Pulse New York
Yeah.
scene of bands. Like they all like Diet Sig and Power Bottom, like
Oh yeah.
quarterbacks all record up there. So it's like a really cool approach. I love people from that scene a lot, and
Yeah.
so I've been to that a lot.
The upstate New York scene right now is like killing it suddenly. Like,
Oh yeah, it's nuts.
It hasn't really ever been a thing, really. I guess there's some colleges up there, but I'm from like the New York area, and it's usually like the city bands, and like now it's becoming like Jersey's producing a lot of bands, and upstate New York, and like.
Oh yeah.
So it's good to see.
Purchase and Bard, like those schools just kick out bands that are amazing.
Yeah.
Like band after band after band. It's amazing. We just don't have anything like that in the South. Like local scenes are kind of a struggle sometimes because everybody moves. Because the Northeast is right there and it's so good, so everybody moves.
I saw that you wrote online something about, I think on Twitter recently actually, about like what your role as an artist was, and that's something that I'm always thinking about just as like a creative person, and other bands I'm always talking to about it. With so many things that are going on right now, obviously you're writing like pretty intellectual music that's sort of like driving into these important issues. But where do you see yourself? Like, what are your goals in terms of your music, in terms of creating change?
It's a really interesting dynamic because you don't. I can currently care about a lot of things, and the range of things I care about varies from like really macro concerns, caring about politics and just world affairs in general. But then, that goes all the way down to very micro things like being very empathetic towards my friends, trying to have nurturing relationships with the people I'm in contact with every day. And, when you write songs and make art, it can be about any of those things or multiple things at the same time. So it's, I don't know. I've always been a person that I try to write about micro stories that have like bigger implications and can be helpful on a grand scale. So there's songs that just have like multiple readings available. But yeah, when you're considering world affairs, it can be tempting to write like very, very big songs, very largely like macro political songs. But for me, it's a question of like what comes most naturally, like what ways can I be most vulnerable and empathetic in a song, and what songs can I believe in most? Because like I said on Twitter, I started with that question of, well, what's my role as an artist when all of this calamity and really harsh shit's going on? And then I just funneled it down to like the best I can do is just be open and honest and teachable and transparent about how I'm learning and how I'm coming to learn how to care for other people better. And so I just want to put that out there as much as possible, and to not impose any boundary between myself and the people who are listening to my work. So it's just about making good art.
Yeah, I would say that's great though. I mean, and yeah, like you said on Twitter, and like you're saying now, when you put like goodness and like caring energy out into the world, I mean, it sounds like super like garbage, but it really does create like an environment where people can talk about things, and hopefully you assume that at the end of the day they'll come around to the good parts of it, right? Like that
absolutely,
they'll take something good out of it. So what are some of your interests maybe outside of music? Like do you have any like hobbies or anything that you do when you're trying to get like out of the music vibe?
Yeah. Gosh. What's funny is like not Not really. Like am not only a songwriter and a musician, but I'm also just an avid music fan and listener, which is funny because you would think that's always the case, but that's not necessarily always true. I have a lot of friends who are artists and musicians that don't necessarily actively listen to new music. You know, they have what they like, and they'll buy something or listen if something new comes around that catches their ear or inspires them, but they don't have like an active diet of listening to music. That is a very real thing for me, though. I love collecting records and just listening to music, and I'm just constantly ingesting and participating in conversations about music. So that's one really, really big thing. Other than that, I definitely am an outdoors person, and our whole band is. We all live like in the sticks. We all just live in mountain towns, basically. So we are always outside. We're mountain boys, always hiking, just doing that sort of stuff. But I have a cool community of friends here in Cleveland, Tennessee, where I live. It's like this small college town north of Chattanooga, Tennessee. But I have a group of like 6 or 7 friends that I'm really, really close with. And really, I spend all of my extra time investing in those relationships and just getting closer with those people and hanging out with them at any place.
That's great, man. You touched on a lot of cool things there. As far as record collecting, that was a cool thing that you dropped in there. What would you say? What would you say is like your favorite record that you own, like your pride and possession?
I would say there's a record by this songwriter named Nathan Phillips, who used to go by this name called Winston Jazz Routine, which was this like really ornate, sort of like chamber poppy music. It's sort of like if it's like Sufjan Stevens, but not nearly as wonderful. It's just like much softer and more subtle music. But after that guy did Winston Jazz Routine, Nathan Phillips put out a record called Postcard, and it's just one of the softest, most friendly records I've ever heard. I've just never heard anything like it, and that record just, whenever I put it on, it gives me such a feeling of like real calm. And the record itself comes in repurposed cardboard sleeve. So it's like an old Goodwill record that's been flipped inside out and rebound. Wow. And on the front of every record, there's a different postcard that's sort of like matte laminated onto it. And all of the text on it is like hand stamped. Wow. And it's really, really nice. And it's like, the thing is, all that limited stuff would make it sound like it's a really valuable and sought after record. But like no one knows or cares about this guy's music, which is such a shame because it's really, really beautiful stuff. So that's definitely my favorite record. I cherish that thing. My favorite experiences with being like a music fan started when I was a kid, of just like getting a jewel case CD from Best Buy and sitting down with the Walkman and just like reading the liner notes. And I just had like a very intimate experience with music. And now my experiences with music are like very social. I talk with a lot of people about stuff. I'm always online talking with people about records. And while I do like that, the core of music listening to me has always been like that personal, intimate experience. So record collecting is a good way to enhance that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And unlike like the jewel cases we grew up with, records, mm-hmm. they just have like this lasting sort of like almost like a living artwork type feel to them that I don't know, it makes it cool to collect them, even ones that aren't rare. You're like, this, I have this. Yeah,
absolutely. And as an artist, it's so nice to like deliver things through that channel. Like when we have the jackets for not profanity. Well, we have those too, but we have the jackets for Brokenlegged, and actually like being able to hold it is really, really nice. And to feel it as like a tangible finished product and actually put the needle on it is a very, very satisfying thing.
Definitely. That's always one of the coolest moments, like working with bands or working with labels or anything, when you can hand a band their record and be like, yep, here you go. You did this.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's our label, or Chuck, who's one half of Tiny Engines, showed up to a house show he played in Charlotte, and that's where he lives. And he showed up with like 3 sample jackets, and he didn't warn me that he was going to do so. And I was like, not entirely ready for it. Like, I wasn't ready to see this thing that I looked at on a screen so many times, like in somebody's hands, and it really freaked me out for a second. It was a very cool moment.
That's pretty much all my questions, but the album's about to come out in like about a month, right? A little over a month. So what are some of your future plans? Are you going to be playing some shows? Is there any more sort of like promotional stuff?
Yeah, we're going to be playing a bunch of shows in the new year. Basically, if you live anywhere in the North American continent, will probably be playing where you are at some point. So if we announce a tour, like we're about to announce like an East Coast or Midwest thing, and it doesn't include where you live, know that there's another tour down the road that will include it. We're just going to do a really extensive full U.S. in like little 3-week sections. But the first one coming up is in the Northeast, and we're doing Canada for the first time, which I'm really, really excited about because I've fallen in love with a bunch of Canadian songwriters this year, and it's going to be fun to go over there. But
that's great.
Yep, just a bunch of touring, and I'd like to put out an EP or something like that, maybe in the next year, just so I don't know, we prove to people that there won't be a 3-year wait for the next record.
Hey, I won't complain if you give me another EP on that one. I won't.
Yeah.
But that's great, man. I'm definitely going to have to come catch you when you come up towards the New York area, man. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. We have like 3. We're playing Asbury Park, New Brunswick, and Brooklyn. So.
Awesome. I can't even. I have no excuse then. Those are all pretty close.
Yeah.
Here's one last question. If you could play anywhere in the world, like dream scenario, where would you like to play a show?
Honest to goodness, I want to play the UK so bad. Like, so incredibly bad. When I was in school, I spent a month and a half over there with like the art program at my school, and just getting to go to some of the former industrial towns turned art hubs in the UK it was really, really awesome. Specifically Newcastle and Glasgow in Scotland. Would be really, really exciting places to play. Australia is also a big one. I'm a huge fan of often super underrated and overlooked, like Australian sort of indie music. Unfortunately, all the bands I liked from that era are broken up. But if I could go back in time and play with, I don't know, there's a band called Purpleen from there that is one of the best bands ever. And it'd be super sweet to play. So I guess anywhere within the English Commonwealth, I'd like to play.
Those are great choices. So hopefully you'll get out there soon.
Yeah.
Buy Brokenlegged. Support their trip to around the world. So
thanks so much.